All right, let's take a look at how we can create our own curved label. All right, so just like with the circular grid container that we kind of went with last week, I'm going to go ahead and show you all the options that we have available for us here, and then we'll jump into the script and I'll show you how to create it, as well as, of course, explain what's going on with it all. So at the top, we just have, of course, our text property. So we can change this text to, of course, anything that we want to put in there. All of that is perfectly fine, just like a normal label. And that's one of the important things. I want to try and keep it as close to being a label as possible. We do have curve mode, so we have circular. So we'll go over that first. And for that, we can change the radius of our circle here. Just set that back to 30. You got arc degree, which you see our effect there. So if we're going in the circle, it's affecting how spread out everything is going around the full 360 degrees. And then we have the starting angle, so you can determine what part of the circle it starts with, or if you want, you could even animate it to spin around. Okay. We have clockwise turned off. You do have the option to turn it on, and you can see we'll be spinning out the other way in that case. So you do have that option there if you wanted to change that up. Personally, I usually have it off with these, but if you want to do that, you can. And of course, you have your center offset that you could tweak. Next up, we have our arc modes. So we have arc up and we have arc down. And with these, we just have our curve strength here. Now, of course, you could, with arc up or arc down, you could change the curve strength enough in the negative direction to get the opposite effect. But it's not strictly necessary. As you see with it's you have quite a whatever range that you want to go with. I'm not putting a limit on you here, so let me just reset that, bring that back down. And then we have text width. So if we go to the default, you can see we're quite large with this amount of text. That's at 300. You can always change the default yourself. And as you see, we can go ahead and tweak those numbers. And with this, we kind of flipped it, which is kind of interesting, but there we go. So in reality, you'd probably have maybe something more like that, right? But that works for arc up and arc down. And I'm still providing you with a straight option, so you don't have to swap it out to be a label. And with this, you just have your character spacing options. All right, cool. And then we have one last option here, orient to tangent. And with straight, you're not going to see anything here, but if we go back to circular, you can see here, if we turn this off, you can see the characters each character is staying perfectly straight up. And with it turned on, which is the default, they're all oriented so that the bottom is pointed towards the center of the circle. And if we were to look at that with arcs, you can see small difference. So you do have that option that you could play around with. All right, personally, I stick with circular, but all right, so those are all of our options here. You also have just a normal font option, and we're using label settings as well. So you can either just add a font, or you can go into the settings and you can still get your option of system fonts, colors, shadows, stacks, and all that. All right, so that's everything that's all of our options that is going to comprise for this circular or curved label, I should say. So let's go ahead and jump into the script and find out how we create this. So for this, we're gonna go into, of course, distraction-free mode. So we got nothing but script, so we don't have any, so we can see as much code as we can. Should say. Now, how to create this up? Well, first up, we obviously need to set up our class. So I just come down here so I can grab my code that I have off on the side. Have that, bring it in. So of course, we're starting out with a tool annotation, which of course means the script runs inside the editor, just like a normal label would. And this will of course let us see our curved text update instead of having to constantly keep running it to see every little tweak and setting. We're of course giving it a class name of a curved label, and we're just extending a basic control because we don't really need to go anything further than that. And I'll state that there are multiple ways that you could go about something like this. You could draw the characters on the screen, but we're not going to be taking that approach. Just want to put out there that there are alternative ways to achieve this kind of effect. Alright, so let's start out by defining our curve mode. So that's of course going to be an enum. So we can go ahead, our curve mode, so we have the original circular arc, our upward like a smile, our downward like a frown, and then just perfectly straight text. Alright, and each of these are going to have their own update function for updating our text, and based off of this mode, basically determines how our text is going to get updated. Now, for the export variables, now all of our variables here are going to follow the same pattern. So I'll go ahead and just bring this in. Now it's just telling us we don't have update, which is fine. We're going to create that later. But all of our exports is going to be, of course, export tag, var, the name, type, equals our default value, and we're going to have a set get. Now get is just returning, so if you wanted, you could delete that. You don't really need it. And for set, of course, we're going to set the variable text to the value, and we're just calling update on it. So that's the only thing that we're doing different here, right? Set the value and call update, and we're going to be running through that for all of our variables here. And this is where all of our customization is going to come in. Now, text is of course going to be our text. What to do, right? Surprise, surprise. And curve mode is just taking our enum here and giving us access to select our options here, with circular being our default selection. All right. Next, I'm going to use some properties. Sorry, not properties, some groups. So you see here, I'm going ahead and giving you a note, circular mode properties. We're exporting a group, circular mode, and this is so we can have each section or each block sectioned off into their relevancies. All right, so let me just go ahead and grab these. And there we go. All right. So what we're going to have here inside of our group, we're going to have a radius, which is a float. Again, you can set it to whatever number you want to start you off with. And again, we just have our set is a radius equal to value. So we're just setting it, and we're just calling update. Next, we're exporting. I'm using a range here, so I can specify between 0 and 360 in increments of 0.1 for the degrees. And then, once again, we're just using set, apply the value, call update. We go to start angle degrees, which is almost the same. It just has a lower minimum value here of -180. I'm setting it to -90 to start with. We just have set, apply the value, call update. All right, so these, they're not too difficult. We're just doing the same thing over and over with different types. Clockwise is a Boolean set to false by default. set value, update. Center offset, set as a vector 2, 0. Set the value, call update. Alright, that's the circular mode. And we're going to do something similar with the arc mode, right? So we're going to create a new group. Curve strength is a float. Set the value, call update. Text width is a float. I've given it 300. Set the value, call update. And that just leaves us with a couple more options here. So make sure I grab the right section. There we go. And this is our common section. So this is our character spacing, default 0. Set the value, call update. Orient to tangent, it's a boolean, set to true. Set the value, call update. Font variable is just a font type. Set the value, call update. And the last thing is our label settings, which is a label settings type. Set the value, call update. And with that, we have all of our variables set. Now we can get into the actual code to get us set up here. Let me just catch up by scrolling down on what I have here. All right. So next up, we're going to have our ready function. And all we're doing in here is we're calling update. We're just going to initialize the curve text once the node enters the scene tree. So, like I said, this is very simple. All we're going to do is call our underscore update function that we're going to create here, and it's going to generate our curved text. All right, easy enough. We also need to be able to clear our text out very easily. So we have a function clear chars. So for C, which we're just defining as a node, and get children, queue free, right? So we're just deleting all of the children. All right, and we start to get into some of these bigger functions, but not too big. We jump into that update function of ours, right? So what we're going to do inside of that, we're going to clear out all the characters. If the text is empty, then we'll just exit early with a return. Otherwise, if we don't return, then we must have at least one character text in there somewhere. So we're going to match the curve mode, and we're going to check. We're just going to say if it's circular, then we're going to use update circular. If it's arc up, we're going to do update arc with a +1. If it's arc down, we're going to update arc with a -1. And if it's straight, we're just going to update straight. And of course, these are all functions we're going to jump into. So this is going to let us know how our text is going to be displayed on the screen. Right, so based off of this mode, depends on how we update. So let's start with the circular function, our circular update. All right, so update circular, of course, we're returning void. And let me just scroll down here. All right, so what we're going to do in here is we're going to create the text and arrange it in a circular arc pattern. So, and first we want to convert our text into a string into an array of individual characters that we can loop through each character later on and append it to our chars array. Then we can count and early return if there's nothing to display, which of course we will. That's what we're doing here, right? We're creating our array of chars, getting each character in our text, adding it into our array, right? So I'm just explaining what we're doing as we're going down. Get the size. If it's 0, then we don't have any text, and return. Right? So this is just an extra safety call, right? Because if we have no text, this should exit us out, which means we should never be updating, calling update circular in this case. But just in case we somehow get here, we can do a double check. If we have no characters in our array, then we must have had nothing in our text. And if we somehow got here, we can exit out early. All right, next up, we have our three variables: step, direction, and center. And this is going to be our math setup. With step, it's going to be how many degrees we advance for each character. And we divide our total arc by the number of gaps between characters, -1. Count -1. Then we add any extra spacing, which would be our max, or the max value of count -1 or 1, and then preventing a division by 0 if we only have one character, thankfully. Next is our dir, which is our direction multiplier. So we're going to have -1 for clockwise and +1 for counterclockwise. And we're just using a ternary expression there. Next up, we have our center, which is just, of course, our vector 2. It's going to be size times 0.5 plus the center offset. And center is where we're measuring from the middle of our control node plus any offset. Right? Because remember, we do have that offset option that you could tweak and play around with. That takes us into the start of our for loop here. So we're going to loop through each character, and we calculate the angle for this character by starting at our start angle. And adding step times the index times our direction. We're going to then convert this into radians because Godot's trigonometry functions use radians rather than degrees. So our option here, deck to right. If you're on an old version, that is the number 2 and all one word. But I'm assuming in the newer version 3 options, if you're still using those old versions, I'm assuming that was actually updated. But I don't use those versions, so I'm not sure. I can't say for certain, I should say. And then we calculate the pause, right, the position, using basic circle math of of our cosine gives us the x component, sine gives us the y, and then we multiply by the radius and add to the center. So now that we have all of our positions and angles and everything figured out, we can go ahead and we'll create a new label. We'll create a new label node, set its text to current character. So going through this method, instead of just drawing directly on the screen, each character is going to be its own label. So you could tweak and play with these individually if you really wanted to, but this is just what I figured was the simplest way for us to also incorporate things like label settings. Right, so we're creating a new label, create a new label node, and set its text to the current character. And if we have label settings, we're going to apply those. Otherwise, if we have a custom font, then we apply that. Right, so if we have label settings, set that. If we have a font, we set that. Then we add it in as a child. Now, reset size is going to recalculate the label size based on its text and font. And we set the pivot offset to the center of the label, so rotation happens around the middle. Then we position it at our calculated position, subtracting the pivot offset to properly center it. That takes us all the way down here, and we're almost done with this function. All that's left is to orient to tangent if we have that enabled. Then we rotate the character to follow the curve. We use the angle plus 90 degrees times direction plus, because the tangent to a circle is perpendicular to the radius. Now, luckily that is the largest, and I don't think it's going to be the largest, but all these are going to be pretty similar in length. I'll try to speed this up a little bit now. So, but next up is going to be our arc. We'll just go ahead and grab that and bring it in. All right, So our arc, updating the arc. Same thing, right? Create the same, we're going to create our parabolic arc. It's either going to curve upwards or downwards. We're collecting all of our chars, all of our characters into an array from our text. If somehow it's 0, we return. Alright, then we need to calculate our total extra spacing. Sorry, it's kind of spaced out there for a moment. The direction parameter, I guess I should mention, is either +1 or -1. As the note says here, that's going to determine if we're curving up or curving down. It's kind of glossed over that, but we're going to calculate our total extra space that we're adding, then the effective width, including the space. Our start X centers our text horizontally by putting the text position at half of the remaining space, and base Y is our vertical baseline, the middle of the control. We then go into our for loop for our interpolation, and we're just looping through each of our characters. T is our interpolation value from 0 to 1, and it represents where we are along the text. At the first character, T is 0. At the last character, T is 1. And we calculate X by linearly interpolating across the effective width. We are down here now on line 194 with curve T. And this is where our curve magic actually happens. So curve T is going to remap our 0 to 1 range to a -1 to 1, centered at 0. Now, this is important for our formula, and the Y calculation is actually going to use that formula. And I realize we're going off screen here. So it's our base Y plus direction times curve strength times, and in parentheses, 1.0 times our curved, or minus our curve T times curve T. Right, and what this is going to do, this is going to give us, basically give us our curve. That's at 1.0 in the center and 0.0 at the edges. Multiplied by curve strength to control our intensity, and by direction to flip it upwards or downwards. And then, like we did before, we're doing the same label creation. Create a label, set the text of that to the current character. If we have settings, set it. Otherwise, if we have font, set that. Add it as a child. We can use reset again. The pivot offset and our positions. Right, this is all same kind of stuff that we used in the circle. Circle set. And then for the rotation, we need the tangent angle. So the derivative of the slope at the current point that we're at. And we get this by taking the mathematical derivative of our formula, -4 times strength. Sorry, not -4. 4 times strength times our curve T divided by the width to account for our horizontal scaling and multiplied by a negative direction. Hold that over in case you didn't get that. There we go. That gives us the rotation, which is our atan, with our derivative passed in as the argument. And this will convert the slope into an angle in radians. And this makes each character perfectly aligned with the curve's direction at that specific point. And we are just about done. Now, if you don't want this section, you could, of course, completely remove this. As I would say, it's probably better just to use a normal label here, if you can get away with it, depending on your specific case. With the straight function, you should be familiar with this now. Get our characters, put it into an array. If it's 0, we exit out early. If somehow we got there. We get our total spacing, the width, start X and Y. But for the most part, this is basically just our arc mode, just without the arc option, or the arc tweaks to calculate the, the parabola. But like I said, it's probably better if you just use a normal label if you can get away with it, if you don't need to be changing it in mid-gameplay for any reason. Then it's probably better if you just go with a normal label and just remove this straight option. But if for some reason, whatever you're doing in your project, you're going to be changing the mode, then sure, I've got you a straight option in here. And that just leaves us with one final function, which is our simplest one. This is just the notification. So we're saying if engine.isEditor hint. So if we're inside the editor and we've got the process notification, then we're going to call update. It's as simple as that. We don't need to get too fancy. And that'll give us our curved label here. And we see I've got everything set here to null, so just close that and open that back up. Now remember, it's a tool script, so if you already had stuff in here, you can remove it. Alright, now if you don't see anything initially here, that's just because it's probably too big for your default, in your default settings. So if you scroll out, you'll notice there it is. It's gone ahead and it's curved around there. So we would just have to come in, change the radius, things like the radius. Alright, so we can go ahead and bring that in. Now we can tweak our arc degrees, our starting angle, whether it's clockwise or not, orient to tangent or not, and so on. And if you're curious about the font and the way it is with this being blurry, if you've had that issue yourself, that's just oversampling. So if you're using something like label settings, right, you can come in, font, maybe using a system font, add element, let's say Calibri, and it still looks, well, fuzzy, blurry. You just go ahead, you can go into the oversampling and turn that up, and you'll get a much cleaner or much sharper text. And that works as well with your fonts that you bring in. You can just click on it in your file system, go to the import tab, and you have oversampling option here. So with that just cranked up to 10, I can just drag my font in, and there we go. Right, nice and sharp. But like I said, this is font settings, so we do have the option to come in and use outlines and shadows as much as we want to create the most hideous abomination that we can think of. Alright, well, that's it. That's the curve label. There's all of our update modes and how to go about that. And with that, that's it. Take care, so long, and I'll see you guys next time.